Nice. So let's just go into his skills and let's discuss each and every single one of them. So like you said, his light skills, there's combos to it, but there's also arrows attached to it. So Implosion Arrow.
Yeah. So the Implosion Arrow is sort of a quick way, if you're in melee combat, to sort of gain some space and draw enemies into a cluster. There's a lot of ways that he can capitalize on that, whether that's switching back to sword combat or using some of his other arrows in his arsenal. So it's just think of it as a mini version of a Kate Singularity. It's just meant to draw in some of the smaller enemies towards a single focus point.
Nice. And then Ascending Slash.
So a lot of the other light skills are traversal related or meant to set up interesting sort of reactions for combos. A lot of them either play into comboing for additional melee attacks. So the Ascending Slash, for example, launches the enemy, takes them off their feet for some of the weaker enemies. So you can sort of juggle them and bounce them around. You can switch to the arrows at that point too. So using those to attack enemies that are sort of weakened, you can juggle them with the range combat as well.
Nice. And you can do the Implosion Arrows in the air as well for that.
Yep.
Split Shot Arrow.
So Split Shot Arrow was one that we were looking at some interesting ideas for some of his arrows, and we've seen this in some of the comics and in some of the movie references, where he can fire an arrow and have it split into multiple projectiles. So this one basically fires out, and if you don't have a melee target or like a melee lock, so you don't click in on the sticks or whatever, each one will sort of go to a different target, but you can focus them in on a single target if you lock onto them first. And it's mostly just a way to break through, block on some enemies or just sort of affect a large crowd. The air version of that actually fires two arrows, so you get sort of increased number of projectiles.
Nice. And this is one of my favorites, Bag of Tricks.
Yeah, so early on, I really wanted to showcase sort of a wide arsenal of arrows in ways that weren't just switching back and forth on the D-pad or switching to the range stuff. So for that, we had follow-up moves that basically alternated between other arrows in this kit. So after doing the split shot to hit enemies, he fires the tripwire arrow, which sort of knocks them on the ground. And then he fires a charged pulsar arrow, which creates a big explosion on impact. And then he fires just a massive amount of split shot arrows at the end. So it's really good for crowd control.
Nice. And then this is just like some more sword skills from his heavy, right? Oh,
yeah. So most of those, there's two traversals, the evade and the sprint. And those are meant to be, again, more sword focused, either breaking through guard or doing increased damage. And so like the unstoppable blade will spin them around so you can sort of capitalize and get the backstab or the, increased crit chance from behind. But the suspension arrow is one that, we again wanted to create arrows being interplayed throughout his melee combo. And so this is his heavy combo finisher, chained off the light attack. And this one will launch enemies up into the air and sort of juggle them in the air. So in the little tip video there, those are frenzies, so they're a little bit weaker, but you can juggle like some of the riot bots with the shields and stuff like that. And so that'll actually let you attack them with arrows sort of while they're suspended.
I love this one. This is super fun to see in actual combat and everything.
Yeah, and so this is the air version of the split shot, so it fires two of the arrows for increased projectiles.
Nice. And then this is a bunch of arrow types, basically. So can you explain to us cluster arrows and all of its upgrades?
Yeah, so like Kate, he has 3 different arrows that he can, aim and shoot with, and you can swap between those on the D-pad. Cluster arrows are one arrow type. We wanted these to be heavy hitting, arrows that would stagger the target or knock them back a little bit, similar to something that you would actually hit, like his sword heavy attacks, for example. So they're kind of slow firing. They're very narrow focused. They're meant to be, used on a single target. Whereas the tripwire shot sort of is the charged version. And like a lot of our ranged power attacks, we, up the damage, up the impact. We use those to break through shields. And this version, it's specifically meant to either knock down or push back enemies. So for the guys with the shields, right, you're just gonna sort of break their guard. But if there's anyone that isn't defending against it, you'll sort of knock them onto their off their feet. And then for some of the stronger enemies, it'll just sort of stagger and push them back a little bit. But it has a wider arc, which you can upgrade through some of the other skills.
Nice. And then razor arrows are perfect draw.
Yeah, so this is basically the same as Kate. We wanted to have that through line between the two archers of a standard arrow and the perfect draw shot to sort of emphasize the archer skill. So you have a 3-shot combo that you can fire them pretty quickly, but if you measure your shot and release at the right time, you get the damage and the impact bonus and the increased crit chance. And you can see that with the sort of indicator on the reticle there on when to release. And then for the charged version of that, we did alternate from that actually. So while Kate has the ability to fire a disruptor arrow, which increases crit chance on the target, we went with a different skill for Hawkeye, which is Deadeye. It's not a different arrow so much as it's more of an innate ability that he has to focus and pinpoint his shot on a target. And so as he, aims at the target, once he's got that fully drawn, he builds up a charge level on the target with the intent of he's going to get that perfect shot. So each charge level that you build up on the target will increase the damage. It'll increase the reaction. So if you really focus in on that target, you can knock them off their feet and send them flying. Or it can be as quick as just a quick guard break. So.
And you really feel this one with the PS5 haptics, by the way.
Yeah.
It actually feels like you're drawing a bow for that.
Yeah. And
Pulsar arrows.
Yeah. So our not necessarily a last arrow type, but the third option on the wheel there is pulsar arrows. And so we wanted an explosive arrow, but we didn't want it to be just the same thing as Kate. And so we looked at ways that we can make that feel different and unique. And for that, it was using the, Stark Tech's pulsar energy explosions. And so when you fire the arrow, it can build up a charge of energy over time. And that's indicated by the blinking light on the arrow. So by default, it's, it starts off as blue and then it'll go to yellow. And then once you get the final upgrade, you can have it go to red. And each time it hits a different tier, you can remote trigger that detonation and you'll get a bigger explosion. Unlike Kate's, you can't shoot it to trigger it. So you do have to fire the arrow and then manually trigger the detonation. Or there's a timeout on it that'll eventually trigger. But and then we have an upgrade for it that allows it to pin targets. So if you really just want to stick a target to a wall or a floor or whatever, you can do that, and then that arrow will just kind of build up, and then you can either leave it and it'll blow up on its own, or you can trigger it. These are really good if you want to either quickly break through shields, or if you want to juggle the target. You can actually use that to sort of open them up and then switch to other arrows, or hit them with one of those and then launch them in the air and then remote detonate that while they're in the air to sort of keep them in the air and suspended. So
nice. I will try to do that.
Yeah.
So his intrinsics, there's a lot going on with it, but there's a few arrow types. Can you just talk about all these at once, I guess?
Yeah. So his intrinsic ability, focuses on his sort of senses for the environment and being able to quickly dodge enemies. So that's sort of how he blocks, is he'll dodge attacks and sort of sidestep them. But if you time it correctly, you'll sort of get a quick draw shot there. It's just a normal arrow, but it's meant to sort of stagger and open the enemy up. You can follow that up with a disruptor arrow. So that's an arrow we saw in Kate's kit. He sort of physically jams the arrow in to debuff the target. And then he's got a rocket arrow as another follow-up, which that one's the bottom on the list there. And that one basically just attaches a rocket, right? Or it's an arrow that attaches a rocket to the target that will sort of send them and push them back. And so you can use that to create distance and push back enemies that might be a little bit tougher if you don't want to engage with melee. And then for his intrinsic attacks, we sort of have 2 arrows. One of them is the grapple arrow, which you see inside his traversal. We use that as an offensive capability. So, you know, that's the R2 and triangle, or R2 and heavy attack. And that just launches the grapple arrow and quickly reels into the target, where he can then juggle the target in the air. So he's got a follow-up upgrade to that. And then his light intrinsic attack is the boomerang arrow. So if you're a fan of the comics, you might recognize this one. You know, there's actually a whole segment with him and Kate, and he's sort of trying to convince Kate that the boomerang arrow is the best arrow because it comes back.
Respects it, basically.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to incorporate that into his moveset. So, you know, when you fire that arrow, it goes out and it comes back. You know, and it'll hit one target for sure. It can hit other ones if it's in its path. It doesn't specifically seek out to do that, but there is an upgrade specifically for timing the second shot at the right time. So as soon as you catch the arrow, if you trigger it again, he fires out an arrow that will actually seek out multiple targets. Kind of like Cap's shield kick, if you're familiar with that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's just another one of those, and he does it with style, right? He's not looking at the shot.
Oh yeah, love it.
He's basically like, I know where all the targets are. I have like perfect mastery over the shot. I'm gonna fire it, and it's just gonna hit a bunch of targets.
Classic Hawkeye.
So heroes, until next time, Kalikalikalow.